One night on a Milwaukee farm in 1919, a teenager had been ill. His health was deteriorating quickly. His mother was getting concerned, so she sent for the local doctor. The doctor arrived, took one look at her son, and was concerned by what he saw. But he felt that he was just a small-town doctor. He wasn't experienced enough to know what was wrong and what to advise the family, so he sent for a more experienced doctor from the nearby larger town. When the doctor arrived, they took one look at the sick boy in his bed before heading just outside the bedroom into the hallway, and in earshot of the boy, they told the mother, "Your son has polio and will be dead by the morning." On hearing this, the boy was disgusted that a doctor would tell a mother something like this, that they would take away a parent's hope in such a blunt fashion. The boy asked for the dresser to be moved across his bedroom. The dresser had a small mirror on top of it. The boy had the dresser positioned so that the mirror reflected the view from outside in the direction that the sun would rise. He was determined to prove the doctor wrong and knew that if he could just make it through the night and see the sunrise in the reflection, he would have survived until morning. Overnight, the boy drifted in and out of consciousness, keeping his attention on that mirror, waiting for the first signs of light. After many hours, he saw what he was waiting for, the first signs of golden light striking the mirror. On watching the sunrise in the mirror, the boy smiled, having survived the night, before drifting into a coma. 3 days later, the boy came out of his coma, but was paralysed from the neck down. He could move his eyes, and he could speak just a little, but other than that, he was paralysed. The trouble with life on a farm is that everyone has to carry on with their work. Initially, the boy was just left in bed every day, but he started to get bed sores. To prevent his bed sores, he was tied into a rocking chair in his room, and every morning his family would position him in front of his window, looking out across the farm. He'd sit in the chair for hours at a time and had nothing to do but observe. To occupy himself, he would listen to people's footsteps. He tried to work out who was walking between the barn and the house based on the sound of their walking. After he got good at this, he started trying to work out what mood the person was in, based on subtle changes to their walking, like the speed that they walked, the pressure of footsteps, and other details of how they walked. With practice, he was able to work out who was walking from the barn to the house and what mood they were in, and other details about them. He started to get used to his new situation. He was getting good at observing people walking between the barn and the house. He enjoyed looking out across the farm and watching his family work and play. One day, the boy was tied into the rocking chair in the morning, like usual, but this morning his family forgot to position the chair in front of the window. The boy longed to be by the window and longed even more to be outside. He closed his eyes, drifting deep into his mind, wishing and dreaming of being outside on the farm, dreaming of climbing his favourite tree, of playing with his family, of working on the farm. He sat for hours with his eyes closed, dreaming of being outside. On opening his eyes, hours later, he was surprised to find that the chair was near to the window. He wondered whether, while lost in his reverie, someone had entered his room and moved his chair close to the window. As he thought more about it, he realised that this hadn't happened and that the chair must have somehow moved itself. He was curious how this could have been possible. As he sat there, imagining climbing the tree outside, he noticed a twitch of movement on the back of one of his hands. He realised that thinking about climbing the tree had caused that twitch. He realised that his desire to be outside must have made his body move, which in turn made the rocking chair move across the room. He realised that imagined movement triggered actual movement within his body that he had no conscious control over. This realisation gave him a new challenge and new purpose. He started to focus on trying to unparalyse his body. He spent hours every day, day after day, just focusing on one hand, imagining reaching up and climbing his favourite tree, until the twitches in the back of his hand became movement of his fingers, and then movement of his wrist, and then forearm, until eventually he could move one whole arm. The boy then focused on unparalysing his other arm and his body, and then his legs. As he started unparalysing himself, he was observing his baby sister and how she was learning to walk and move around, learning how she discovered her different body parts, and learned about those body parts in relationship to her other body parts. He used his observations to help him learn how to move and relate to his own body. Eventually, the boy had gained enough movement and strength to be able to drag himself out into and across the ploughed fields on his stomach. Over many months, he built up his strength until he was able to use crutches to walk about. He finally managed to gain back some independence. A couple of years later, the boy had gained back a lot of fitness, but he still needed to use crutches to get around. He decided to go on a canoe trip for the summer. He planned on canoeing with a friend, but the friend pulled out of the trip at the last minute, and he didn't want to worry his parents, so he just didn't tell them, and decided to make the journey on his own. He set off with about $4 in his pocket and a diary. He had a little bit of food on him, and was making a 1,500-mile journey on the Mississippi. He was proud and disliked asking for help, and when he set off on his journey, he needed to use his crutches. During the journey, he encountered many challenges. He found himself at locks that he couldn't pass, so he would drag himself up out of the water and sit behind the lock and just wait. He'd wait as long as he had to, and sometimes most of the day, until someone would eventually come along and ask what he was doing, and without asking for any help, they would let him through. Or perhaps he would be low on food, and someone would come along, and then, through conversation, they would invite him to dinner. Over his journey, he developed many skills for encouraging people to offer him help without him directly asking for it. As the boy completed his journey, he'd developed a deep tan, he'd toned and exercised his body, and was able to walk out of the river with his canoe. He set off on his journey with just about $4, but when he returned, he'd doubled that and had over $8. On returning from his adventures, having built up his strength and gone from death's door and paralysis a couple of years earlier, he went on to study medicine. He didn't like the way the doctors had treated his mother a couple of years earlier and wanted to be a doctor who would help and bring hope to others. He took many of his learnings that he'd gained from his trials, his observation skills, his understanding that we have unconscious abilities greater than we realise that can be encouraged and facilitated. He developed and demonstrated observation skills to rival legendary fictional detective Sherlock Holmes, and went on to become one of the world's most famous and influential psychiatrists, Dr. Milton Erickson, who gave hope to many clients and taught others how to give hope to those that they worked with, and how to encourage people's inner potential and uniqueness. In his 40s, Milton Erickson was struck with post-polio syndrome. He was told that he may not live past 45. Over 60 years later, after that fateful morning where Erickson drifted into a coma, having proved the doctor wrong, Erickson finally passed away. In his last few years, when he was breathing with half a lung, had a dislocated tongue, had muscles which had spasmed and torn from their bones, and was in constant extreme pain, with difficulty speaking, breathing and writing, and confined to a wheelchair, he was asked how he kept going. He would reach with his left hand to lift up his right hand to write right-handed. He would struggle from his wheelchair to other seats or into cars. He taught trainee therapists and worked with clients right through to the end of his life. Erickson's response to how does he keep going was that the alternative is far worse. He was asked why he didn't just learn to write with his left hand and instead was using his left hand to help him continue to write with his right hand. And he said that he wants to hold on to what he has for as long as he can. Milton Erickson's story is, in my opinion, one of the most inspirational and positive stories of hope and meaning. Whether it's the meaning to prove the doctor wrong, driving his desire to survive the night, or meaning that He'll get his movement back and unparalyze himself, driving his desire to put in the work required to get his body moving again. There's far more to Milton Erickson than this simple story. Tales of his legendary observation skills and how he used these skills, through to his unique perspective on utilising people or animals' natural abilities rather than imposing a model or his own perspective upon others. Here at the Mind Changers, myself and Dr. David Lewis post helpful and interesting psychology videos every week. If you don't want to miss any, feel free to subscribe and click the bell notification icon. If you've got any ideas for things you'd like us to talk about, feel free to let us know in the comments below. Thank you for watching.